Irrational Games was taking a pretty huge risk when releasing Bioshock Infinite in the summer of 2013. After the runaway success of the first game and the slightly less enthusiastic response to its sequel developed by a different company, Irrational decided to break away from the franchise norm and set Infinite in an entirely new location. Through it all, the game's director Ken Levine made sure to keep Bioshock's core themes about American history and philosophy intact, but this time, instead of the Atlas Shrugged inspired world of Rapture, Levine and his team turned out to create an exaggerated version of the United States at the turn of the 20th century. And much like Rapture, when it comes to historical inspiration, there's a lot more than meets the eye. First off, let's start with the actual name of Bioshock Infinite's new world, Columbia. Though largely forgotten today, Columbia was once the shining personification of American exceptionalism. Originating in the 1700s, the word Columbia was derived from the name of Christopher Columbus and was often used to refer to North America by Europeans. However, the origins of Columbia as an actual character came from 1776, courtesy of the first published female African-American poet in US history, Phyllis Wheatley, who wrote a poem referring to Columbia as a woman and concluded with the lines, "The land of freedom's heaven-defended race, fixed are the eyes of nations on the scales, for in their hopes Columbia's arm prevails." From there, the image of Columbia as the personification of American spirit took off, being featured on everything from official US currency printed right after the Civil War to World War I propaganda and countless statues, solidifying Columbia as America's almost official mascot. Oh, also, in 1887, a small record company was formed that was named after the character, Columbia Records. They went on to become one of the biggest record companies of the 20th century and found another little startup you may have heard of, CBS, or the Columbia Broadcasting System. So if Columbia was such a big deal, what happened? How come I didn't even know about it till I read this script? Well, after the Statue of Liberty was gifted to us from France in the late 1800s, Lady Liberty began to start hogging some of the limelight as the popular patriotic symbol in the mind of the American public. But Uncle Sam ended up being the final nail in the coffin, replacing old Columbia on almost all American propaganda during the Second World War. Bioshock Infinite definitely hasn't forgotten about her though. Not only is its setting obviously named after her, but you can also find an angel-winged statue of her looming over the city. Anyway, don't feel bad for Columbia. She still gets to be in like a ton of movies every year. So let's move on to the founder of Columbia, Zachary Comstock. Ken Levine has said that Father Comstock was primarily based on two figures from American history, former President Teddy Roosevelt and founder of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith. According to Ken Levine, Roosevelt was a very progressive figure in many ways, but he's also what you'd probably call a neoconservative in his view of America's role in the world. This was obviously a factor in Comstock's view of the American exceptionalism. Joseph Smith represents a different aspect of the character. A charismatic preacher, Comstock mirrors Smith in both calling himself a prophet and his ability to gain utter devotion in the hearts of his followers. That's not the only religious connection though. Feeding into Comstock's serious messiah complex is the fact that his last words, "It is finished," are also the final words of Jesus Christ, according to the Gospel of John. Another important aspect of Bioshock Infinite is the Vox Populi, or Vox Populi? Oh crap. So many nerds are gonna be so angry about how I said that. Meaning voice of the people in Latin, the group began as a populist response to Comstock before becoming something a little bit darker. Ken Levine has revealed the inspiration behind them, saying probably the most similar thing to the Vox Populi is the Red Army faction in Germany in the 1960s and 1970s. They started out as a very idealistic movement that was frustrated with the number of former Nazis in the West German government. And as the government started cracking down violently, the Red Army faction started responding in kind, and the stakes kept going up and up. And the original intent of the movement got very lost. This, of course, mirrors the story of the Vox Populi, but, you know, with a few less George Washington robots. On to our comment showcase. This week's good comment comes from Geo2640, who tells us that Frank Fontaine from the first Bioshock game got his name from The Fountainhead, a novel by none other than Ayn Rand, the writer of Atlas Shrugged, who inspired the Bioshock franchise in the first place. Next is our bad comment, which comes from Nightmare Gamer, who says, "In the background of H.P. Lovecraft's photo, there is a creepy smiley face in the top right corner." Okay, to be fair, this is actually a really good comment and there's nothing wrong with it. But once you see this face, you can never unsee it again. What? Have you done, Nightmare Gamer? So last week we gave you a ton of homework asking both the trivia question and whether Skyrim or Fallout 4 referenced H.P. Lovecraft better. The answer to the trivia was A, Shadow over Hector. And now for the reference competition. Drum roll, or what? I have to put the drum roll in? Oh, I'm not putting a drum roll in. I'm too fucking they can use their imaginations on a drum. The votes have been tallied up, and it appears that you guys voted Skyrim as the one true Lovecraft reference king. It looks like Tamriel has beaten the Wasteland this time around. So this week, we have a Bioshock Infinite question. What does Booker DeWitt have tattooed on his right hand? A, chains. B, AD. C, a Big Daddy. D, John 8:12. Big Daddy. I like it when you call me Big Papa. Okay, that's enough.